in theory, any race longer than a marathon is classified as an ultramarathon. So in theory, that makes me an ultra runner because I ran a 50K. Actually, I ran 3 of them, but they were spaced out by several years of non-ultra running in between. The thing is that I don't think I really deserve the title at all because I don't seem to like some of the things real ultra runners like blisters. I actually had an anti-blister strategy when I was preparing for the 50K. Or running at night. Being on a dark, unfamiliar trail is a little too character building for me, and I think I need to first build some character and then maybe think about doing that kind of thing. And speaking of trails, I'm always afraid I won't see the route until after it has tripped me. And in the dark, I think I might end up finding a lot more routes than usual.
Or you might think they're snakes.
I might also think they're snakes. That could be scary.
You think about them being snakes so much. I sent you a photograph from Australia when I was running and said, "Look, Liz, here's a photograph of a snake on the trail."
It was a garden hose.
Yeah.
But you never know in Australia because, they're famous for snakes over there on the trails because you told me all about those. Anyway, moving on. As much as I love running, I'm not a big fan of doing it during sleeping hours, which is something else ultra runners seem to do a lot of. And I don't think I would enjoy hallucinating either, which seems to happen a lot to people that are running really long distances without sleeping. Well, lucky for our listeners, you won't need to listen to me give you any advice on ultra running because today's guest author has no shortage of experience doing ultras and has run Western States 100 more than 12 times in addition to many other events. Hi, and welcome to the Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review books written for runners, about runners, and by runners to help you decide if you would like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can help keep you motivated about your own running or maybe inspire you to try something new. My name is Liz, and with my co-host Alan, we're going to talk with author Dean Karnazes about his book, A Runner's High.
A Runner's High, My Life in Motion, is the story of Dean returning to Western States 100 to do this race again in his 50s, at a time where he's also wondering if he's still relevant in the sport. He's waitlisted, so doesn't feel the motivation to train very much. And as he gets to within only a few months of race day, Dean enters a 100K race to kick off his training. Throughout the book, Dean reminisces about the past, talks about his family and how they've supported him throughout his life and in his running career, and recounts anecdotes about people he meets during ultras. So let me tell you a little bit for the 1 or 2 running people who don't know Dean Karnazes. Let me tell you a little bit about Dean and his background. Dean Karnazes is an ultra runner who has an impressive list of accomplishments, including running 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 days. I think that's sort of like the ultimate fame thing. Running across Death Valley in the middle of summer. As somebody who doesn't tolerate heat very well, I can't imagine that. Running a marathon to the South Pole. That's probably more my kind of marathon.
Not mine.
Run a 200-mile relay race solo. Dean has also won the Badwater Ultramarathon, commonly known as the toughest race on Earth, and the 4 Deserts Challenge, which involved racing in the hottest, driest, windiest, and coldest places on Earth, basically. You're getting the idea here, I'm sure. He's authored and co-authored several books. The most well-known is probably Ultramarathon Man, and I guess for better or for worse, Dean sort of ended up with the nickname or the tag Ultramarathon Man. It appears in the book a few times. But he also wrote a book with Matt Fitzgerald, a friend of ours who's been on 3 times on our podcast, called 50-50, Secrets I Learned Running 50 Marathons in 50 Days. That could be an interesting one. I haven't seen that one. Dean is also a graduate of the USF McLaren School of Business and Management and an accomplished businessman with a notable professional career working for several Fortune 500 companies and startups. So without further ado, welcome, Dean.
I don't feel worthy of that introduction, but I appreciate it.
Well, yeah, I think you earned all of the introduction and then some.
Yeah, we're probably missing a few accomplishments, but
Yeah. We want to reserve a bit of time to talk to you. Otherwise, we could just do your bio for the whole podcast. So
You can, yeah.
let me kick straight to the opening question, which I should have warned you what the opening question was, so you'd have some chance to prepare. But basically, it's always the same, and it's, what made you decide to write this book?
I guess that my first book, Ultramarathon Man, needed a kind of a concluding story, or a kind of a work in progress story from what happened 30 years ago to what's going on today. And I thought I would try to answer the question, am I still running? Am I still enjoying running? How is it I'm still running? And what's the journey been like along the way? So I thought that I wanted to write a book that accomplished all those things, but also more importantly, I wanted to write a book that lived up to its title. And that was a pretty lofty goal, because a runner's high is to me at least, is a pretty profound feeling. And if you read good literature, I also think you get a high of a same sort of serotonin or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But if you read a good passage in a book, a good prose, it stimulates you. So I thought, you've written, this is your fifth book. Maybe you've learned how to write a bit better since your first book, because I still think my first book is horribly written. And I thought, try to do your best as far as being a writer as well, not just a runner. And that was kind of the genesis of A Runner's High.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the writing was really good because, I've never aspired to like run through the dark or, like run until I'm hallucinating because I haven't slept. And I was reading the book and, I was starting to think, well, maybe I should try one of these like real ultras. I mean, I've done 50K, but that's not, I wouldn't say that's a real ultra. You're running during the day. It's basically a marathon with an extra bonus 8 kilometers tacked on the back.
And some mountains in the way, probably, as well.
If you do it on the trail, but I did one on the road, so so you don't even have that challenge. I guess maybe we can start with if anybody like hasn't read your other books, how did you start ultra running? I mean, like just running is something, but ultra running, and especially, you've been doing it for so long. I don't remember hearing so much about ultra running, let's say 20 years ago or 30 years ago, as everybody knows about ultra running now, but it wasn't so popular back then. So how did you get into it?
Yeah, my origin story is kind of interesting in that I used to love to run when I was a kid. So I remember running home from kindergarten when I was a young boy, and that was like my earliest childhood recollections. And then I ran competitively all the way through high school, and we won the league championships when I was in my first year of high school. And I thought, that's as far as I'll ever take my running career. It's been a good ride, but I thought running was getting kind of boring, and I had better ways to spend my time. So I stopped running when I was 15, and I got through high school. I went to university, and then I went to graduate school, and then I went to business school, and I had a very comfortable corporate job in San Francisco. And then the night of my 30th birthday, I was in a nightclub, in a pub, in a bar with my buddies, doing what's a tradition on your 30th birthday. You get very drunk. And I told my friends at midnight I was going to leave, and they said, "Where are you going? Let's have another round of tequila to celebrate it. It's your 30th birthday." And I said, "No, I'm going to celebrate by running 30 miles instead," which is, close to 50 kilometers. And they looked at me and they said, "But you're not a runner, you're drunk." And I said, "I am, but I'm still going to do it." And I walked out of this bar, and I didn't even own running gear at the time, but I had on these silk underwear, these silk like boxer shorts. So I'll never forget, I took off my pants and threw them down the alleyway and just started stumbling into the night, heading south, thinking that a township called Half Moon Bay was 30 miles away. And, when the alcohol wore off, I thought, what the hell are you doing? This is really a very decision. Bad idea. Yeah. But it felt right. So I just kept going, and I somehow made it. I ran straight through the night and decided that I was going to quit my job and become an ultra marathoner. And that
Oh
was in
wow.
19.
All that in over your 30th birthday party.
Yeah.
Were you married at that point? Because I can imagine, you know, I was in the corporate world before I retired. I was an executive in the pharmaceutical industry. I could just imagine coming home one day and say, hello, dear, I'm quitting. I'm going to be an ultra marathon runner. My wife would
Yeah.
probably have killed me.
Yeah. I mean, I was married. I married my high school sweetheart. So we were we were expecting our first child as well. And I basically said to her, I'm going to walk away from a consistent monthly paycheck, a nice paycheck. I'm going to give away my stock options, my bonuses. They had given me a company car. I'm going to give back the company car. We're not going to have health insurance anymore. We're not going to have a 401k matching program anymore. And she looked at me. She said,
Thanks.
yeah, go for it. So she was very supportive.
And at that point, you were really going out on a limb.
Yeah, I mean, this is 1992, and nowadays, kind of the gig economy, it's not that unusual for someone to kind of have a side gig or
Yeah.
you know per, pursue a side profession, but this was a full-on commitment. I mean, this is quitting my job, and most people just worked for one or two big companies and then retired, and assuming I was going to make a living as an ultra marathoner. And you guys probably know, I mean, most of these ultra marathons, there's not a big cash purse involved if you win
No.
the race. And
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't even think about that though. I just thought I want to do this and just do it. Does
Oh,
that does
okay.
that answer your question, like how I got into it?
Yeah, I
Certainly
mean, I
does.
think that's fantastic.
I'm
And I
surprised you're
love
still alive.
So
My
am
wife would have
I.
killed me if I'd done that.
although I have to say that, you talk about your wife a little bit in the book, and she seems like very like she seems to have a bit her not the same passion, but like she really seems to love her job and her place in life, and it almost seems like she's very zen about everything else. I feel like one of the things that you did multiple times was Western States 100. For people that don't know Western States, maybe you can describe a little bit what it is, and also just what makes this race so special. Like, is it a little bit the cap on the number of runners because you can only have 369, or is there really something special that people really just want to do this race?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna bore you with another origin story, but after I finished that 30-mile drunken stumble, I started running fairly consistently, and I thought I was a pretty good runner. Like I was never getting passed by anyone. I was always, faster than everyone else, but I wasn't racing. I was just running 5 or 6 miles out to the Golden Gate Bridge every night. And then one evening, as I was coming home, running over a hill, these two guys that were almost like different species just ran past me as though I was standing still. And I thought, my God, I've never seen anything like this. And they had packs on as well. And they ran up to the top of the mountain, the top of the peak we were running to, and they just disappeared over it. And I thought, I'd love to talk to those guys, but I'll never see them again. Well, I got up to the top, and there these guys were. They were doing push-ups with their backpacks still on. And they weren't a talkative bunch, but I finally got out of them. They were training for a race. And I said, well, how long is the race? And they said, well, it's 50 miles. And I said, but hold it. In like, are there hotels or campgrounds along the way? I mean, where do you stop? I mean, and he said, no, buddy, the gun goes off and you start running and you stop when you cross the finish line. And I thought, that is the most insane thing I've ever heard of. I got to try this. So I found out about this 50-mile race. I went and did this 50-mile race, and it almost killed me. I mean, I was destroyed. I'll never forget sitting in the medical tent at the finish, and I was wrapped in, a Mylar blanket, kind of shivering. I had salt crust all over me, and I see these same two guys, and now they're high-fiving each other, and they're saying, we qualified. And I'm thinking, well, what'd you qualify for? The insane asylum, And they said, no, we qualified for the Western States 100-mile endurance run. And I said, hold it. Did you say 100 miles? Like twice as far as we just went? He's like, it's 100 miles. It starts at the base of a ski resort The first 5 miles, you run right to the top of the highest peak in the area. And then you run through the mountains for 95 more miles, through the snow, through the heat. You cross a river in the middle of the night. And I said, well, when do you eat? He said, you eat when you run. I said, when do you sleep? And he said, you don't sleep. You try to do it within 24 hours. And I could not wrap my head around what he was saying to me. And the last thing that they said to me as they were walking out is, hey, buddy, you qualified as well. And when they said that to me, it was one of those life defining moments where I thought, I have to do this race. If I don't do this race, like for the rest of my life, every morning I'll wake up thinking I qualified and I didn't have the courage to do this. So I learned about the Western States 100-mile endurance run and why it's such an iconic race. It was the first 100-mile foot race on a trail ever. And the origins there was that it was a 100-mile horse race. And one of the horse racers, he was a real fit guy. His horse came up lame a couple of days before the race, and he told the race directors, I'm still gonna do the race. And they said, well, how are you gonna do it? You don't have a horse. And he said, I'm just gonna run instead. And they thought he was absolutely nuts, but they let him do it, and he somehow finished his 100-mile trail race. And that was in 1974. And I signed up for the Western States 100, and that was 1994. And it was just one of those things where even now, 30 years later, I remember every moment of that race. I mean, it's etched in my mind, every minute of that race, every rock I stepped on, every volunteer I talked to, everything. It's just so, the way that the air felt on my skin, crossing the river, holding onto this rope. It was just one of those moments that is so rare and epic in life that you just don't forget it.
So I've kind of a little bit of a throwback question because, in 1994, like there was no internet to sign up for races or even get information about races. And this was some obscure race somewhere, in the middle of nowhere that hardly anybody did. How did you end up finding more information? Like, how did you register? Because, I remember running in the 90s and it was basically you'd fill out these little paper forms and you'd mail them in. And so you had to already know that the race existed because you had to somehow get the form for the race. And so I remember I did basically just local races. So that was easy, but I'm guessing this wasn't local.
No, but I'm glad to hear you've experienced the same thing. I went to the library, and remember the Dewey Decimal System? I tried to do a search and I found an Outside magazine. This was an Outside magazine first came out, and there was a story apparently in this magazine about this race. So I opened it up, and I'll never forget, there was a picture of a guy who was trying to run up a hill, and it looked like he was so destroyed he couldn't make it up. And this was not a big hill, this is toward the end. He couldn't get up this hill, and he just looked devastated, dirty. And I thought, do you really want to do this race? But they had an address, where you could register. So I mailed in my entry. I'll never forget. And I got, it's a lottery, so there's not enough slots available for all the racers that want to enter. Back when I first started, it was about a 50-50 chance of getting in. And I got the letter back saying I was accepted. So it was all via US mail.
And after that, you started finishing, you began a run of finishing quite high up in the field and were able to get re-invited back because of that.
Those were the younger days.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you finish in the top 10 of the finishers, you get a free entry the next year. That's one of the reasons I was able to get so many finishes, is because of that.
Okay. And is that still the case? Do they still give entry for the next year to the top 10? Yes. Okay.
They do. The thing is now is that it's so competitive. The field, the level of performance has really increased that, back in my day, I could, for, a decade, get a top 10 finish. Now, it's hard to do that because after, 3 or 4 years of you finishing top 10, this younger crew comes in. It's very hard even to finish top 10 anymore.
I was pretty interested to read in the book why there are only 369 runners allowed in the Western States. I didn't know the answer to that. I just thought it was just a restricted field. But you actually explain in your book why that's the case.
Yes, and also that the odds of getting into Western states are lower than the odds of getting into Harvard, which is
Yeah, that's
absurd.
surprised. It's not 50-50 anymore.
No. But let me ask you what let me ask you guys a question regarding the book. I mean, did you enjoy it, and what parts did you particularly enjoy? And uh, I don't get much feedback unless I go on Amazon, and I usually don't do that. So, did you enjoy the book?
We did. I mean,
Absolutely.
I guess okay, so like I guess a little background is like I'm more of a road runner, I did track in high school and I like, the road and trying to see if I could better my time. And Alan likes the road as well, but he does like do a lot of trail and he enjoys that. So for me, like sometimes even though I read the stories of like your 100K race that you did to prep for the Western states, and it's kind of like a bit mind-blowing, like like just doing that and going through some of the experiences you went through. I found that you were still very relatable. Like even though you're kind of an ultra trail runner superstar, but I found that the book, like you really described well kind of just I guess everyday, not insecurities necessarily, but thoughts that I think a lot of people have. And just about when you were talking about wondering if you're still relevant in the ultra running world as a runner, like how long can you maintain your career, and all those kinds of, I guess, fears that I think like I could relate to, because I'm 42 and I'm wondering, like, am I ever going to run this sub 3 hour marathon? And so it's the same kind of thought, it's not the same scale, obviously, but also like all your questions about, just like sometimes looking back, because, you're looking back on your life and you're wondering, like, did I do this right? Like, was I a good father? And all these things I think that, everybody kind of has. I mean, I know that I do. So it was um it was nice to sort of see that
Yeah, I
that
mean, we kind of reserve these sort of comments for the end usually, but you asked us the questions, so I mean, I've got in my notes for the end. We get to see Dean as a real human being rather than as the sort of ultramarathon man, but as a real human that you can relate to, rather than some superhuman that you can't really relate to.
Mhm.
Um, and that was the thing that kind of pleasantly surprised me about the book. I was thinking, oh, I'm going to hear about wonderful exploits, but I'm going to be not connected to it at all. When in fact I was extremely connected to it, probably more so because I wasn't anticipating that. I think just another version of what Liz is saying. Really, what we see in the book is your love for running, which we all share. So we see your love for running rather than your love for winning things or achieving records. We see in the book, and it's aptly named "A Runner's High" from that point of view. We see your love for the actual the act, the process of running, and we're all here for that. So
Mhm.
reading about that, I think that's what makes it relatable.
Also, if we want to just jump in and talk about like quotes, I mean, there was one that you said running an ultra marathon builds character, but it also exposes it. And I don't know why that one, but that one just really kind of sat with me, because I think, well, running kind of does that to us. Racing does that to us. It also sort of made me wonder, like, what kind of character I would have if I ran an ultra marathon. So I don't know. I found that the writing, like the book, it pretty much read itself basically. It was great.
Well, I mean, as a writer, that was one of my goals, is just to get out of the way of myself, so that you could just read it and kind of forget about who the author was or whatever, and just get absorbed into the story.
Hmm. Yeah, and it flowed well, you know, from like the present to the past and just like different moments in your life. It was really good in that way.
Did you think when you were entering Western States again, 20 plus years after previously being able to do it successfully, did you think, well, maybe I'm gonna just block my record book here? I'm just gonna turn up and maybe not be able to do what I, well, certainly you're not going to be able to go as fast, but maybe I'm not going to be able to achieve the way I've achieved in the past. And I'm just going to prove that I'm an old has-been, you know. And what was it like to be like sort of the human wait, the normal human waitlisted for the entry and those kind of things?
I think, running is the most democratic of sports. And I think that honoring the Western States lottery system and not trying to get any special exception to get entered is a good thing, is a beautiful thing. It's if I could finish top 10, I would. Or there's something else called the golden ticket, where you finish top 3 at a number of these other marquee events.
Mm-hmm.
It's very skewed toward elite runners, obviously. And at my age, there's just no possibility I'm going to be able to compete with some of the younger folks. So going through the lottery process, I think was a good thing. And I think, to your point, it shows people that, I'm just a runner, and running is something that unites us. It doesn't really matter, if you're an elite or back of the packer. It doesn't matter what God you worship. It doesn't matter your skin color, what language you speak. Running is something it's a commonality we share as a species, as being human. So I've always thought that when we run, we're equal. And so the lottery process is just something I have to go through like everyone else.
Speaking of running, you actually meet a legendary runner, Ann Trayson, at one of the aid stations because she was volunteering. She wasn't running. Like, what was that like for you? Because I mean, I've heard of Ann Trayson, so
So she won Western States like
she,
14 times or
yeah,
something ridiculous.
unbelievable. And I think she even won it outright a few times, like, first overall, not just first woman. So what was it like to see her, and have you connected with her since? Do you know if she's still running?
Yeah, I mean, I have a little bit of a relationship with Ann, and I always remind young runners about Ann Trayson, because her name is not, her name should be definitely more widely known than mine. But I think it's a generational thing. She's a complex character, and I think she'd admit it herself. I will say that, for someone of her status to not be her status anymore, it's a hard reckoning. I mean, it's hard for me, and I haven't won Western States, 12 times, I think she won it. So how do you make the transition from, being someone that's always at the top of the podium? And I mean, there's a saying that I have that, you'll never win if you don't hate losing. And what I knew of Ann when I raced against her is, I mean, she just hated losing. I'm sure she enjoyed winning, but I think more the hate of losing drove her. And so when she started losing, psychologically, it must have weighed heavy on her with that sort of personality. And, she was very competitive, and not just with herself, but with others as well. So I'm sure it was a heavy transition for her to go through. And there, you can see someone for that, maybe a psychologist or a therapist, but unless someone has really lived that experience, their words are going to be somewhat hollow. And there's not a lot of people that have lived the experience of Ann Trayson. So how do you counsel her? How do you talk with her and relate to her struggles? There are very few people that can. And it just seemed like in the few moments we spent together at Western States, she's still there. There's still this charm about her, even though it's more in a volunteering role, that just reinvigorated me to keep going. And I saw the best side of Ann Trayson.
I
Does
guess
that answer your question? I mean, I know Ann, and she's definitely a complex individual.
she's trying to stay connected to ultra running and to running, but maybe has a hard time, I guess, competing and not not winning?
Well, she has a coaching practice, and she's certainly helped a lot of people. And I'm trying to help her grow. I've tried to help her grow her coaching practice because I know, what a thrill to have Ann Tracy as a coach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially for I think women, like to have more female coaches for women is amazing. I mean, sure, there's not enough of them.
It certainly sounded in the book like you got an injection of inspiration and motivation from, having the surprise visit from Anne at the aid station. And I guess that also kicks to your fame and your the motivational factor. We see on a number of occasions, and we see in the book as well, that there are people who come up to you and go, usually Carno or something like that, and then proceed to tell you that, oh, you were one of the reasons I got in, or you're the primary reason why I wanted to do this event, or you motivated me to do this. That's kind of cool. But when you're in the middle of Western states and you're struggling in your own particular struggle, are you conflicted between, oh God, I wish it was just a bit more anonymous so I could get on with my personal suffering, versus being, I don't know, a celebrity, and the nearest thing ultra has got to a celebrity?
That's an interesting question. And, I'm an introvert. I'm a pretty strong introvert. So I'm almost like a hermit when I'm not in groups of people. And I'm also, somewhat self-conscious. And the people that come up to me, I should say, are great people. Like when someone comes up to me in the airport and says, "Oh my God, you're Dean Karnazes and you really helped me, or you changed my life." It's a good person. It's not like I'm a rock star that has a bunch of groupie fans. I mean, these are people I'd want to go running with.
Yeah.
So I feel blessed in that regard. But when you're 70 miles into a race and you got snot coming out of your nose, you got food and you're stuck in your teeth, your nipples are bleeding, and you've got to go take a poop and someone wants to do a selfie, it takes a lot of discipline to kind of come back and say, "Oh, you can do this." Yeah. But it does definitely add another element of challenge to some of these races.
Yeah, I was kind of getting that feeling when I was reading the book, going,
Mhm.
give the guy a break. He's going through hell here.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, they're well intentioned. They're well intentioned, and if you've ever worked at an aid station, you know that you're fresh as a daisy, so you can't really relate to what someone who's been out there for 14 or 15 hours is going through. When they come in and look like a zombie, you have so much energy, you just want to try to lift them up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess speaking of just like how long ultras are, it seems like having a crew is very important. And in the book, actually, your son ends up crewing you for this last race. And I know like you were you were not really sure about that situation throughout most of the book because he didn't seem to take it seriously, but then seemed to really surprise you at the end. I don't know if you want to just talk about like why, like how important is it to have a crew, and maybe follow-up question is, can anybody run an ultra without a crew and just relying on the aid stations?
Yeah, I'll answer that last question first. I do it all the time. I've run a number. In fact, the last 200-mile races I've done, I haven't had a crew, and
Okay.
I actually prefer it. But some races, like Western States, it's just the whole lore of having your crew. It's almost it's a bigger thing than one person. I know that race is very like community driven. So those 200 milers I'm referring to, where I just did it self-supported. Well, I shouldn't say self-supported because there are aid stations along the way. So I did it without a crew and with no pacers. At Western States, that'd be highly unusual for someone to run it without a crew and without a pacer. Almost everyone uses a pacer at Western States. The thing with the way I told the story, and I chose Western States. I chose the Bishop High Sierra 100 just because I thought they kind of led to a narrative thread of a story. And I think to tell a good story, you have to involve others. It can't just be only about you and your struggles. I think family. I mean, I'm Greek, and I always go back to Homer and Odysseus. He's always trying to get back to his family. So I wanted to involve my family in the storytelling. And if you're a parent, that kids kids are interesting because you think your son or daughter, and all of a sudden they do something, and you're like, hold it, where'd that come from? And to have those kind of reveals, you have to take them out of their comfort zone and put them in new environments where you're seeing their skills being applied in a different sort of way, or lack thereof of skills. So I thought, let's learn a little bit more about your son than you probably knew before. And I asked him to, or he actually volunteered to crew for me, and I accepted.
That's pretty nice. I think there's a good aspect to the story. The people you meet along the way. I was quite entertained by the French guy. You don't get many people coming over from France actually to Western States, but the French guy who came up behind you and was annoying the hell out of you to begin with. And you thought, oh, he's being a stereotypical French guy. Does this guy, I actually looked him up on the results. You find out he's called Fabrice, but he's actually, I think, Fabrice Perrin. Does he know he has a cameo in your book as the French stereotype?
That's so funny. No, I don't think he does. In fact, I didn't even look up his name. I just remember talking with him, and it's one of those, during an ultra, you have these interesting encounters with people. And I've got to say, in his defense, if you've ever been to Europe, and this is probably more something for ultra runners to relate to, the trail running culture over there is very different, especially in France. And Europe is a big place, but for some reason, when you're running these races, these other racers come up behind you, and they just are like within a breath away from you, behind you, on a 100-mile footpath that's very spread out, and they just stay there. And I don't know I don't think they think they're being annoying. I think it's just kind of culturally that's what you do. But for me, I don't like having someone running behind me and hearing footsteps behind me. It kind of makes me think, should I move over? Are they going to run me over? Am I going too slow? Am I going too fast? But I think that's just more of a cultural thing than him being obnoxious.
Yeah, no, I guess the tendency is to say, hey, just come through if you want. And then they go, oh, no, it's okay. And you go, oh, damn.
You've been there. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been there. Yeah.
That was pretty entertaining. I won't go into the details, but people who read the book, they'll get the whole story. And I guess a misconception as well, based on cultural differences. Yeah. One of the things about the Western states that you did for the actual book is, if I remember rightly, it was extremely hot. And you do talk about it being hot, but I guess they're all hot. But I think it was unnaturally warm. And you seem to get into quite a challenge quite early on. I think after about 20 miles, you start talking about, starting to feel the lack of training or the heat. Did you think maybe this is not going to be a book after all? Because if I have to drop out at 30 miles or 35 miles, I'm not going to be writing a book about it. Did you think, or doesn't the great Dean Karnazes think like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, I didn't know I was gonna, at the time, I didn't know I was gonna incorporate that particular race into the book. Yeah, it wasn't like I was running the race knowing I was gonna write a chapter about it in the book. So I think that a bad race is a better story than a good race. A good race, you kind of just high five at the finish, and that
it's all magical.
Yeah, that 3 hour and 5 second marathon is the one you're going to remember forever, right? So that's and yeah, it was shocking. I don't know what went wrong at that particular race, but I had pretty high expectations, and they were very much not fulfilled. So I think that's again, it's a very human experience, right? You set out with lofty expectations, and all of a sudden it doesn't happen. And how do you deal with it? How do you deal with the disappointment? To me, I'm competitive with myself as well. And, to be disappointed that you just ran a 3:05 marathon or whatever, 3:10, because you didn't crack 3 hours, at a point you kind of say, well, I did finish a marathon, and that kind of is something 99.99% of the population will never do.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like what my son Nicholas said to me. I said, well, Nick, I finished mid pack. He's like, Dad, you just ran 100 miles. Enough said. You just ran 100
Hmm.
miles. He's
Yeah,
shaking like,
puts it in
yeah,
perspective
yeah.
for you.
Yeah. And so we talk about Nicholas, but the other part of your crew, and it seems like they follow you everywhere, are your parents. It seems like they're almost like your biggest fan. Like, have they always come to all your races? And if not, when did that start?
Yeah, no, it started with with the Western States in 1994 with my very first, and they've been to every single Western States. Yeah,
Wow.
invited or not. They're yeah. I mean, we've all of us have been along for this journey, my wife included. So, uh, the story was I did want someone to try to crew for me in 1994 when I ran Western States, but my wife was not. She was in dental school, and she had her dental boards that same weekend. Not to mention she was 6 months pregnant, so we didn't think it was a good idea for her to go. So my parents volunteered. It was an awakening for them as well as for me. And ironically, my wife decided she couldn't stand it, so she drove up in the middle of the night after one board and before the next board, and her car broke down on the side
Oh
of the road.
no.
Yeah, so I mean, it was just like a comedy of errors. But I mean, those make for the most unforgettable experiences. Yeah.
On a small scale, Liz and I always talk about, hey, you do all these things, and then you take on an event, and you either get some success or you get some really good stories.
I like that.
Yeah, I wish I could have like less stories and have more
Yeah,
success,
less
but
stories and less learning, and a bit more success would be good. Yeah. I guess it comes up in the book, so it kind of gives me permission to talk about it a little bit. But tragically, you lost your sister Parry in a car accident about 30 years ago when she was only 18. She comes up in the rawness of your thoughts at the ends of ultras, the end of the ultra that you were doing, the particular sort of raw moments. Can you tell us a little bit about her and the effect that she has on you, even now?
Yeah, I mean, she was a big part of my first book of Ultramarathon Man, in that we were best friends, uh, closest confidants. I was a couple years older than her, and she died a long time ago. She died on her 18th birthday in a car accident, and I was 21 at the time. And I went through all of the cycles of bereavement. I was in denial at first, and then I was angry at everyone, including myself. And and then I turned to the bottle. I mean, I crawled into a bottle for almost 10 years, because drinking was the only time I felt numb from the pain. And then finally, at Western States, I decided, the best thing you can do to honor her is to live every day to its fullest. Keep her in your heart, and that's the legacy that she will carry versus these bitter, harsh feelings that I had that she was gone. So once I came to that realization, it really improved my life and my thoughts about her. And I don't know if you guys have had this experience, but I mean this happened. I don't want to date myself, but it was more than 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And there's not a day that goes by I haven't thought about her, not a single day in 40 years. And sometimes it's a couple hours while I'm out running, I just think about our times together. And other times it might just be a minute or two as I'm in an airport. But she's still very much with me. And I mean that's the emotional element of it. But the other element is, how do I incorporate that relationship into this fifth book that's now, well after her passing. How do I bring her into the story, since she's such an important part of my life still, in a way that's authentic, that doesn't come off as trite, but still has impact, so that you get a sense like he did suffer something. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't want people in this fifth book, where it's just a couple paragraphs, I think, that I mentioned her. I don't want that to get lost.
That's cool. Thanks.
it seemed like it was it was a really important moment with your dad. It was sort of like, it was almost like you both knew what you were thinking, and you were thinking about her.
Yeah, it was a pretty intuitive moment. I mean, the other death is profound. And, I think the other thing that, has brought my dad and I closer is I've watched his pain from losing her. I mean, the worst, there's a saying that the worst thing that can happen to a parent is to lose a child. And the worst thing that could happen to him happened to him. And, he loved her so deeply. And to watch his suffering and to watch how he matured and got beyond it, I think brought us definitely closer together.
It actually seems like he is a pretty special guy, because it seems like he's one of those people you can bring him anywhere, and he's gonna know everything about all the other people within minutes of being there. It just seems like he's super social and loves people and makes everyone feel good and incorporates himself into the group.
I think I'd like to hang out at an aid station with your dad.
I bet you. I just bet that someone listening to this is going, I did. Because people say that to me, like, oh, I met your dad. And I'm like, when was that? And they're like, oh, it was 1985, I think. Yeah.
Well, that's very cool.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that stays with you. Yeah.
So you get a I don't want to give too much of the story away, but in Western states, I think you get a bronze buckle for finishing like in ahead of the cutoff, because they have like a golden hour at the end where you got to get in under 30 hours to be a finisher. Do you get a silver one for being quicker under 24? You've got a whole bunch of these silver buckles. You got 10 of them. So is a bronze buckle at age 50 plus sweeter and more valuable than a silver buckle in your peak?
I think it's a buckle. I mean, I think
they're both
I would think
great.
I was going to I thought I was going to potentially run the race in sub 20 hours, and set a new record for the age group, and ended up being, like 27 hours. So, I was very, very far from cracking the 3-hour marathon, if you will. And the race announcer, who's been the race announcer forever, is an old friend of mine, John Mettinger. And, he's watched my career. I've watched his career, and we're old buddies. And yeah, he was, as I was coming around the track, they announce they really stage it well, the way the race is finished. You finish on a high school track.
Yeah.
And they have like an announcer, and they announce as you come in. And most of the runners run with their crew and their family members to the finish line. So he was announcing, me coming into the finish line, and he made a snide reference that, like, you've got 12 silver buckles and now you have a bronze. How's it feel getting older, kind of thing. And I kind of looked up, I saw him up there, and I pointed my finger at him, because I knew most people that would just kind of fly over their head, but I knew it was like a sharp jab, like, hey, you're getting old, buddy. Old and slow. Yeah.
But still enjoying it. Or at least still motivated. I mean, I guess, it says something for the sport if people just want to keep on doing it.
I got 100 miler in a couple weeks if you guys want to join me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we'll just squeeze the training in between. We can't. We're going to Moab.
Oh, we have a good excuse.
Yeah, to run the rocks 3-day event in Moab.
When is that, in April or in March?
It's in March.
Yeah, March 3rd, 4th, and 5th. So.
Yeah. And it's a competitive event, or is it more like run touring?
It's competitive in that, like, people will be there competing.
You'll get a combined time over 3 days.
Okay, so it is a race. It is a race.
Yeah, it's a race. But I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are just gonna go there to do it and see Moab, kind of like us. I mean,
If you know the Trans Rockies run, organized by Kevin McDonald, Huda, which is a 6-day stage race. This is his new baby. It'll be the first year that he's done a 3-day stage race in Moab.
Yeah, I've run Trans Rockies, I think, a handful of times, maybe 5 or 6 times.
I've done 2. So
Yeah, I did it.
bit slower than you.
I did it the first year. I think I did it the first year they had it. So it was only a team race back then, the first year.
I think isn't it still a two-person team, Alan?
No, you can do singles or you can do
Oh, okay.
two-man teams. Yeah.
Okay. So speaking of running, at the end of the book, you have like kind of like a little conclusion chapter where you describe where you were when the pandemic hit and how you dealt with it, because you were supposed to run the Miwok 100, and then it ended up being canceled, but you ran it anyway by yourself with a backpack. I guess running helped you deal with the pandemic. Do you think that runners during the pandemic were maybe more resilient because they had running, or were we just all affected like the rest of the population?
Yeah, it was an interesting and unexpected flow of emotions because I very much like running by myself, and I very much will go out and run 100 kilometers by myself with a pack, and quite enjoy it. But I thought the same thing would happen with Miwok. And what I found is that when I got to those junctures where I knew there'd typically be an aid station, lots of cheering fans and, selfies and all that kind of stuff that I kind of complain about, it wasn't there. And it struck me how much I missed it. How much as much as I like being a loner, I do enjoy the camaraderie of being around, the community of runners. And with that not being there, it just seemed hollow, the whole thing, and it was a bit sad.
One of our questions is, what are you up to now? And you've just told us that you're running 100 in a few weeks. So what is the event? You want to tell us about it?
Yeah, it's an event outside of Pittsburgh, actually, Pennsylvania. So it's on the East Coast. It's called the Rabid Raccoon 100. And there's a 100-miler, there's a 100K, and then there's a 5-person 100-mile relay team. It's a 20-mile loop course. So you don't think of, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania as being kind of a hotbed of ultra running. And they're trying to grow, the race organizers are trying to grow the community there. So they invited me, and I thought, you go do it. It's, they were surprised when I said, yeah, I'll come do it. But I want to help, them build the race and inspire some other people. So that's what's coming up. And then in April, I actually just today launched a business called Greek Running Tours. And it's that's why I was asking if the 3 days in Moab were competitive. This is 6 days of running, non-competitive, and it's foot tourism. So it's a way to see a place on foot. And the longest day is, it's like a half marathon is the longest day. And that's probably going to be over 5 hours because we'll stop along the way, take selfies, do some cultural experiences along the way. And then, you stay in luxury hotels every night, and there's massage services and really good food. So that launched today, and our first tours in April in a place called Crete, an island in Greece. It's incredible for running.
That sounds amazing.
So if people want to get in on that, there's a website they can find, or
yeah, it's just GreekRunningTours.com.
Okay. And you're going to be there, so they'll get a chance to meet you. And
I'm going to be there. I'm going to lead or support the route. We've got. I mean, to have the routes. I went like scouted out all the routes beforehand because I wanted them to be like I know Greece so well. I'm Greek and I travel there all the time, and I wanted them to go to untouristed spots that are better than the touristed spots. So every day, where the run begins. Most of it is, it's about 50-50 on the trail and on the road. But when I say trail, it's not single track rugged trail. It's more like a graded fire road. So it's dirt. It's a dirt path, but it's not super technical running.
You could do that, Liz.
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds like my kind of trail, actually. Like I won't have to, worry about tripping over any roots.
And if people can't afford the Greek holiday, or they don't have the legs for that, and they want to follow you, where's the best place they can follow you in terms of your exploits, Dean?
You can just Google my name. Someone said if you Google Dean, I'm the first reference that comes up.
Yeah,
So,
I feel kind of a bit dumb asking that question. Actually, we ask that to everybody because normally the people are looking to, raise their profiles a little bit, and we thought, well, we'll help them along. Like, I asked the question, I thought, why am I asking Dean Karnazes where we can follow him?
I'm findable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're on all the social media platforms, and you have a website.
I have a website.
I Googled your name.
And I have Greek running tours. I have 2 websites. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll link the Greek running tours in the show notes so people can.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, people can go there if they're looking to travel and incorporate running in their travel. Sounds great.
It's really it's an excuse to eat. You get to exercise because the food is it's
These
really about it's about gastronomy.
Yeah.
This tour. It's just,
these kind of events are fantastic though. I did one last year in the north of Portugal, organized by a famous Portuguese ultra runner called Carlos Sá.
Oh, I know Carlos Sá.
Organized in the Peneda Gerês National Park, and he's a local guy and he knows all the people and knows all the villages and organizes everything for you, and it was absolutely fantastic. So for people who are thinking, oh, are those kind of events any good? They're great. Go do them.
Yeah, and I mean there's a walking route every day as well, because I think we're gonna have a lot of couples signing up, and both partners might not be a runner. So along with the running route, there's a 5K out and back walking route. So you can walk the full 5K, or if you want to turn around sooner. But the walking route's all along beautiful, mostly along the shoreline, but all along beautiful paths as well. So we're pretty much open to accommodating people of all ages and abilities.
When my wife listens to the podcast, she's going to have me
book a trip to
organizing
Greece.
it.
Say you know the organizer, so yeah.
Yeah, I know a guy.
Yeah. I Googled him. Yeah.
We should probably start to wind up. In saying goodbye to you, I could just put one more little anecdote out of the book out there for our listeners. And that was when you met the guy, Simon, I think it was at the end of the Western States that you did, or towards the end, he came up to you all excited or something. And he said, it's my first Western States, and I want you to know that you signed a book for me 5 years ago, and not only did you sign the book, but you actually wrote under your signature, "See you in Western States." And 5 years later, like, he was still burning with the motivation from the signature on the bottom of the book, as well as his own drive, I guess. And he was there at Western States when you were there with your trial. And I think you remark as well that maybe when you signed "See You in Western States," you signed it for both of you, not just him.
Yeah, I mean, that was a serendipitous moment for sure, because you're right. It was at an aid station at mile 85 in the middle of the night. We ended up sitting next to each other on 2 chairs in this aid station, which is so random. And yeah, I wasn't even really paying attention to him. He's like, "Oh, I met you," and I'm, "All right, Simon, let me, tie my shoe or whatever." He's like, "Yeah, no, you signed a book for me." "Okay, Simon." He said, "Do you want to know what you said in the book to me?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, Simon, what did I say to you?" He's like, "You said, 'I'll see you at Western States.'" And I looked at him and said, and that was 5 years ago, and we're here. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. Chance encounter. Yeah.
That was for me, that was one of those little, little prickly hair standing up moments while I was reading the book, of which there are several.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, we'll probably just thank you for your time, Dean, and we really appreciate you organizing your schedule to get some time in with us. We really appreciate it.
No, you guys have been wonderful. I appreciate what you're doing, and keep spreading the word. And I'm going to keep promoting what you guys are doing, because there's a hashtag, running books are awesome. I just discovered it, but I'm going to include you guys on that.
We'll need to put
every
that on
single
that.
one.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I think I'm going to hashtag that all the time.
Yeah, running books are awesome. Yeah.
Okay.
It's absolutely great. And at this point, we'll let you just log off and get on with your family stuff,
I
Dean.
think I'll keep my marriage intact. I
Yeah.
appreciate it, and enjoy the rest
That's
of
a
your
good
day.
idea.
Have fun in Moab.
We will.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks for your
Cheers.
time and enjoy.
And I see a sub 3-hour marathon in your future. You're going to get it done.
Thank you.
Be well,
Thanks.
you
I
guys.
sure hope so.
So what are your overall thoughts of the book, Liz?
So although I'm not sure I ever want to run 100K or even 100 miles, while reading the book, Dean almost convinced me that I should try it. He says that running an ultramarathon builds character, but it also exposes it, which was the quote that I brought up earlier. And I'm kind of curious to find out what it would expose about me. I enjoyed the stories of Dean's parents and hope that when I'm retired, I'll be as carefree as they are. I mean, I would even settle for being half as carefree. I mean, they travel around in like a little converted van and go to all Dean's races. I mean, they just sound like such lovely people. So this book was about running, but it was also about life and a lot of the same worries we have about our family, living a meaningful life, and how we feel about getting older. Even though Dean is a superstar in the ultra running world, he is very relatable in that way, and that he brings up a little of all of these worries that we kind of all have, and sort of tries to work through them. I would recommend this book to anyone that is curious about what it's like to run an ultra marathon, because Dean describes it very well. And I mean, one of those hardcore ones that make you run through difficult terrain and maybe through the night, not like the ultra marathons that I've done, which are pretty soft in comparison. Anyone that likes memoirs will like this book. Dean's life is both ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. So I'll give you one tip, though. I would say wait at least a week after finishing the book to sign up for any really long races, because I think during reading the book, like I almost
just wanted to sign up.
I was like, maybe that Quebec Mega Trail, like 80 mile. I mean, I could do 80 miles. Or 80K. Well, no, it was 50 miles. I don't remember what this. It's 50 miles, eh? 50 miles, 80K. Yeah.
Well, you could, based on watching you do the 50K, as I was gradually deteriorating into a pile of pile of garbage. Watching you, I think you probably could do the 80K.
Yeah, that's about it for me. I mean,
okay.
Do you have anything to add?
Most of my views I gave to Dean because he asked for them, but just to reiterate, I think as you said, Dean's love of running sort of gets under your skin a little bit. You can read the book and you get sort of switched on. If you're a runner who loves running, and it switches on your running love. Yeah, so be careful what you do immediately after finishing the book. You need a cooling down period before you can enter races. Yeah. I talked about seeing Dean as a real human being, and that was great, not just some Superman. The book's got lots of emotion in it. I wasn't sure whether I should ask him about his sister or not. I'm glad I did. But it also has humor, so there's some funny bits, and Dean's not frightened to take a poke at himself as well, I think, which is cool. He's not too serious. And he just comes across as really quite authentic. The basis of the book is Western States Ultra, so as the sort of backbone of the book. That's a sort of what he's doing throughout the book, trying to get into the Western States and then running the Western States. But there are loads of flashbacks, so there are like little periods, whole chapters sometimes when he flashes back because he meets a guy and he goes, "Oh, I remember when we did this," and then talks to you about it. So there are plenty of flashbacks and references. And I think everything's basically explained in the book. So even if you don't understand Western States, or you don't understand some of the terminology, it's all explained to you. So all in all, I think, I found it to be sort of surprisingly good. It was better than I was expecting it to be. And it was kind of different and a bit more than I was expecting it to be. So it was, really enjoyable from that point of view.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. Big thank you to the publisher HarperCollins for providing a review copy of the book, and big thanks to Dean for spending time with us today. If you'd like to leave us feedback about how we can improve the podcast or want to suggest a book that you'd like us to review in a future episode, please leave us a comment on social media. We are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter, we are reviews_running. Please also follow us on social media to find out about new episodes when they're released, or you can just subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming platform. If you've been listening to us for a while and are wondering how you can help us out, there are a few ways. If you enjoy the podcast, spread the word. Tell your friends about us or share a link to your favorite episode with a running partner. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if this is how you listen to your podcast. You can also rate us on Spotify out of 5 stars. And we are now on Buy Me a Coffee, where you can buy us a coffee.
Or if you don't want to buy us a coffee, that's okay too. But go there anyway and listen to, a few outtakes and snippets that we have.
Bye for now.
Bye.